Just notify the public.
Yeah, good morning.
The June 18th.
How you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
There is a point.
I think the public is stay there.
Wow. I just realized Harry's name's still on this. Yes,
But again, Debbie,
It should work.
I'll let you know if it does.
it's not an autonomy, it's what everybody else gets. I'll show up wherever they go.
They do that.
I don't care what we do, just everybody just. tell them
Hope they do.
I thought we could leave right now and go up there, I would.
Right there.
Be back.
I'm suggesting.
I'm sure.
That we go back up there.
I'll intend to do it next time.
Basis for that, anyway.
Yeah.
Michael said next month, so I'll be here back.
July will be here before we know it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we have the June 8th meeting and then the June 24th.
Oh, yeah.
Fourth Thursday.
I would be happy with going back to June 24th.
I would. We'll talk about it tonight.
Actually, I'm sorry, it's June 8th.
It's kind of skewed, you know what I'm saying?
I
Did you
know,
say June 4th? No.
June the 24th is the
Oh, I'm
work
sorry.
session.
Okay. Yeah, because the first Tuesday
June the
is
24th.
like the first.
Work session.
Work session.
Or what we call it.
That's what I'm
What we
saying.
call a work session, it's a town board meeting now.
I know,
Can't,
it gets people
we just
confused.
have two board meetings a month.
Do what?
Two board
Talk about
meetings a
maybe
month.
going back to our digs by the work session, or the second meeting in June, going back home.
And what is holding us up for the June 8th meeting?
Nothing. I was just, my point was, does that give the public enough time
It
to
might
be
not.
notified of our change of venue?
Maybe we need to talk about it.
That's what it's gonna do.
We're gonna talk about it.
Okay.
Because I'm ready to go home.
You just have to cross the street.
You wanna make a motion to adjourn? Oh, Lord, everybody, okay, we got about 2 minutes, but I'm ready to start if everybody else is to get started. Okay. If everyone would please stand, I'm gonna call the North Wilkesboro Town Board meeting to order. I'm gonna lead us in the invocation. And I'd like to ask Chief to lead us in our pledge, and we'll continue from there. Chief Thornburg, if you would, when I get through with the prayer. Let's pray. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, as again we come to you as humbly as we know how. Just thanking you, God, for this day, thanking you, Lord, for the beautiful day that you have blessed us with. And Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to be able to come back and do the due diligence and the work of the town board. Ask that you would be with us and help us to do the due diligence for our citizens, that it might be good for our town, good for our citizens, and that we always want to remember that that's who we're here to serve. And as we go further into the meeting, just lead us, guide us, and direct us, and forgive us of our faults and failures. And we ask for a special blessing upon those that may have sickness or may be in the hospitals. Bless them in a special way and their families. Ask all this in Christ Jesus' holy name. Amen. Place the flag. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay, that brings us down to additions, deletions. I don't know Do you have any that you know? That's it. Okay. We'll move right along. And,
Mr. Mayor, make a motion, we accept the agenda as stated.
thank you, Michael. I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? There being none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. None opposed, motion carries. Action items, we want to get into those. Item A, accept the American Rescue Plan funds. That is Connie going
Connie's available if we have any questions, but Mayor, the first two items are routine, and so if there's no objections, I'll just ask that we can go ahead and approve those if you don't.
Okay, I need a motion to approve and accept American Rescue Plan funds.
Can we,
Do them both.
make the same motion, include the
Both of
American
them?
Rescue Plan funds, the audit contract,
We make
and
it,
review?
do them together.
Can they all be one? Okay. And that we review changes to the town code, chapter 5, and zoning ordinance floodplain section, and call for public hearings.
Excuse me, Commissioner, item C will require some discussion. The action on that is to call for a public hearing, as you said, but Meredith does have the document that she needs to take it through, so I'd recommend only approving A and B at the moment.
Okay, so I will restate my motion that we accept the American Rescue Plan funds and the audit contract as presented.
Good. Have a motion. Need a second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, or any further discussion or any other comments? Okay, there being none, all in favor signify by stating aye.
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 Opposed, like sign, and unopposed, motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, item C. I think you need to point out a few things on that. Is that right, Wilson?
Meredith does, yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay, I think we got Andrew back too. Okay, so I gave you guys a very long staff report, so I wouldn't sit here for an hour to discuss all of this with you like I did with the planning board. I'm gonna summarize it, and then if there are some questions, we can talk about it, of course. The first thing is the public hearing for chapter 16 and our wireless communication ordinance had to be moved from tonight until June 8th. Did not get published in the newspaper, so we were not compliant with the state statute, so we moved that. The items before you for tonight's consideration are Town Code Chapter 5, which is the buildings. The biggest changes were to essentially everything that has to do with building code, building inspections, and then if you do a condemnation of a building. So there was significant changes there. There are a few policy things we can discuss with that chapter. The zoning ordinance was adopted already, but I found out very late from the state Department of Public Safety that we had to essentially completely redo our model floodplain ordinance to meet 2020 standards. So we're not repealing the entire floodplain ordinance, but we're pulling it and reenacting the new state model 2020 floodplain ordinance, which will also be in compliance with 160D. Now there are some policy changes there, there's some recommendations. A lot of the way that ordinance is structured is to give you points in the CRS, which is your community ratings system. We are not a CRS. I looked it up. Big cities are CRSs, and counties are usually CRS, which means you get a savings on your insurance plans. Now, that's not to say we couldn't do it, but it is a tremendous amount of paperwork and something we want to research and look into. So we can go through those policy changes with planning board. They left most of the way the model ordinance was. They didn't adopt a lot. They didn't recommend to adopt a lot of the newer changes. The biggest change they did recommend was to raise the base flood elevation. So the base flood elevation is where you have to build a structure up to a certain height to try to avoid getting flooded. we had 1 foot above the base flood elevation, so when a flood comes, let's say we're at like 984 feet, you have to build your structure to 985 feet. The state recommends doing a 4-foot rise. So that's a big difference from 1 foot that we originally had. But based on the flooding that we have seen recently, the planning board recommended to go with the state's recommendation, which was the 4 feet. So that was probably the biggest change recommendation we had for this ordinance. So for tonight, we can look at those items, and then also, we would need to call for the public hearing. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to do it at our next meeting, because I have to have 2 weeks of advertising. So unfortunately, it has to go to a work session for a public hearing, which would be June 24th. So does anyone have any questions or want to go into detail on a specific item?
Meredith, I actually have a question about the floodplain elevation matter that you just talked about. Would that apply only to new builds, or would it also apply to significant renovations of buildings in the floodplain?
So the significant renovations are treated a little differently. Potentially their HVAC system might have to get elevated to the 4 feet. But a lot of it's probably gonna be a case by case situation. And there's a threshold too, when you do a certain amount of like the tax values when it gets in.
And the state's recommendation is the 4 feet,
Yes.
and, is there any idea how they determine 4 feet? Because I mean, that seems like a fairly significant burden, because I'm thinking, for example, Rose Glen that built down in the block 46.
Right.
I assume that they were built at the 1 foot
Yes.
standard.
Probably.
And so if they had been held to that 4 foot standard, you would have had a completely different grading issue on that particular property down there
Right.
to create that extra 3 feet.
Right.
With parking lot, structure, surrounding topography. Is there any leeway on that at all? or-
It's entirely, like I said, it's a policy choice. That was the state's recommendation. We can keep it 1 foot, or we can go to 2 foot. It's whatever we're comfortable with, whatever the community's comfortable with. That was just they had several, when we go through the ordinance, there's several things starred and highlighted that say like recommended, or if you want to get those points with that community rating system, which we're not applicable to, but in the future, they offered those advice.
Is everything, is it everything, everybody, it's not done, it's,
So yeah, like it's grandfathered in currently, if is that what you're asking?
yeah.
Yeah, so everything that's built now, it stays as is, but anything new that was to come in would have to build up.
Well, is it all, I mean, is it what it do, what it do, or what it do?
Well, one question that I have is, just think about, the Midtown Shopping Center. And, say somebody wanted to demolish that and build a new building. Would they be required to build that up 4 feet now?
Yes, if we had chose to adopt it that way, yes.
No, I'm sorry.
Across the road, I guess it's, I'm not sure what the name of it is. Across from Phillips Tire. I think there was, some thought at one point about building condominiums there, and they were gonna have to be built up about 8 feet. So that would make it now 9 feet. Is that right?
Well, I'm not sure where the 8 foot came from, but
Was to, because they're in that land is even lower lying than where Midtown Shopping Center is located.
right.
And so really what we're doing is making a lot of North Wilkesboro a park if we
Yeah.
pass this.
Right, so it's something we want to discuss, we don't have to make a decision tonight, we do by the 24th, so we might want to talk about it at the next meeting too, because that's a big change.
Well, my feeling is that on the property that would be involved in this, which is really a lot of the property that's that's along the Reddies and along the Yakin where the Wilkesboro Avenue and stuff is, I think 4 feet is a real burden to developers. I see a developer coming in and thinking, because I mean, just to get soil compaction on a 4-foot field is a horrendous task.
Right.
Why is it doing it? I mean, why is they doing doing it?
The state, well, this model ordinance was designated for non-coastal areas, so this doesn't apply to like the beaches. But I think they've seen so much more flooding, you remember Lumberton, they had a lot of flooding with the hurricane. So those are inland flood events where the rivers are rising so substantially. So that's one thing I can think of, is they've seen an increase in flooding, so they've increased the recommendations.
Well, you know,
Is it, on us or is it, I mean, you get, I mean,
I would say they recommended another thing was, tanks. That was a new thing because of a recent hurricane, is you need to make sure your propane tanks, your gas tanks are secure, because they've had those going loose and bouncing around and causing destruction. So they've seen, I think, a lot more severe flooding, so they took a really strong approach with this new ordinance.
I can see that propane tanks need to be secured, and anything that can be secured and made more safe needs to be. And I'm not saying I'm against this, but I feel like it will have such a significant impact on North Wilkesboro that it needs to be carefully thought through. We don't want to invite catastrophe for people who come in and build, but we had a significant flood last summer. I don't remember what month it was. Things flooded that were worried about Rose Glen Manor, but it didn't flood. And
I don't think any of Block 46 flooded.
No, it didn't.
And I don't know if the shopping center, Midtown Shopping Center, had any flooding or not. Closer to the river they did. And I just want us to be very thoughtful about this and make sure we do the best thing we can, make the best choice we can for the town.
The street got flooded a little bit there, down there at the Hadleys.
Yeah, that's right. And,
That's,
maybe the property owner for some of that, or owners for some of those properties, would that be appropriate to invite?
Well, but it doesn't affect them. This is not a retroactive, this is not a retroactive thing. This is a,
Person is looking at, or had been
This is a
looking
new-
at significant redevelopment or new building.
and like I said, I think the 4 foot is burdensome because it's all of that would have to be filled. And I just really, I mean, I maybe, if they've got some statistics that say the 1 foot is really inadequate, I'd be willing to listen to it. But, the thing is since you're not fixing problems that already exist, to put an undue burden on potential development in those areas, because just like you mentioned, Rose Glen it's built in that 1 foot rise, and there, it was not in jeopardy. So I just think, to me, the 4 foot is excessive.
The other thing that is in the back of my mind, I don't know, it might have been 19 years ago when North Wilkesboro was taken into the Main Street program, and we had our resource team come and visit. They stayed 3 or 4 days and were assessing, making recommendations for what they wanted the future of the town to look like, or thought it could look like. And I remember distinctly along the Reddies, where we have buildings that do flood now, they recommended that become like a boutique inn that was built up, because they already recognized the flooding potential for that site right along the river. People could park underneath, rooms, restaurants could be upstairs, kind of like the dentist's office is, I guess. But, you know, one thing, if we went ahead and accepted at least part of this, maybe in the most at-risk areas of the floodplain, it might help us get development we would like to see. But I just feel like this is a big issue and it needs to be thoughtfully considered. Meredith, does it fall under this deadline?
So technically, the way it works is the state has to review the floodplain ordinance, and they have updated it to 160D, but they have to approve it before we can approve it. So the hope is we can do this by the 24th, but it depends on their schedule also, because they're reviewing this, the city.
Are you talking about reviewing our
Yes.
plan?
They have to review the model ordinance to make sure it meets their recommendations. And I haven't heard back from them. So I pretty much sent them exactly what I sent you.
Wilson, do you have an opinion on this? How to proceed?
Well, I have an opinion on how to proceed, yes. So what I was going to suggest is you let Meredith and I go back and do a little bit more work, and on the 8th, we'll come back with some more information, probably a map so that we can see exactly where this would apply, and maybe some examples of developments in other places that were built according to the 4-foot standard, and the difference in costs between that development and the standard development. So that's my comments on how to proceed. My comments on the matter in general is that, you know, one of the things that I saw recently about the effects of climate change is that our area of the world will be impacted most by flooding. Other places, you know, will have less rain and others will be hit by hurricanes, but we're going to be hit by floods. And so I think as a long-term matter, it's reasonable to consider changes to this standard for that reason. Because the building that's built now, 50 years from now, will be getting flooded all the time. If the projections stay true to how they're going. So, but yeah, we can bring you more information on the impact of this. And maybe a discussion on what our other options are.
Yes.
And it sounds to me, Meredith, like we really don't have much of an option. What are our policy choices here?
We could keep it 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, so we are allowed to keep it one.
Yes, it's just, that's the recommendation. I can contact the state and find out why they chose the 4-foot.
That's the other thing, we'll bring sort of the rationale behind the 4-foot part.
I think Andrew, you have a question?
Can we ask that buildings be built on pilings instead of having the 4
They
feet?
just have to be raised.
I mean, I have no idea which would cost more. Either would be expensive.
Actually, if we drill down to like bedrock to do the islands. I think Andrew had a question also.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I apologize for being late. My computer was having issues. Being that I ran a business in a building that did have flooding issues on Wilkesboro Avenue, I'm well aware of the risk of it, and it's terrible. And if you look at the history of our town, it's always been an issue. With that being said, I would be afraid that if you moved it to 4 feet, you might not have any development there. I mean, if we did keep it at 1 foot, I think it might be wise that we have Kurt or somebody, the inspector or something, at least recommend, hey, you know, the state recommends 4 feet here. Your building would be a lot safer. And, you know, I would like to see the numbers that Wilson was talking about on cost of doing buildings there, but I would be afraid we have all this property down there that we're wanting to see get developed. And that might be one more obstacle that might be the straw that breaks the camel's back on why it just never gets developed.
Good point.
So Wilson, what you basically need tonight, as far as the motion goes, is just to move forward with the public hearing for the 24th, correct?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we hold the public hearing on the 24th of June for the Town Code Chapter 5 Buildings and Zoning Ordinance Floodplain Section that Meredith has recommended.
Thank you, Michael. I have a motion
Second.
and a second. Are there any other questions or comments from anyone before we vote? There being none, all those in favor signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign, none opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right. Okay. Moving on into work items. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Appointments of, to the planning board related, planning related board, and that's you, Meredith.
Yes, sir, thank you. Okay, so with the new adoption of the zoning ordinance, we now have to essentially expand our boards. So we would need an ETJ member for our planning board. And for the board of adjustment, we technically need to have 3 ETJ members. We had a vacant position, Jane Wilborn retired. We need 1 more now because of the equal representation that 160D requires. And then the last one is the alternate member has to be an ETJ member. We had 2 in-town members. And I did speak with Danny Long this morning. He's on our planning board. He's an ETJ member. And he's willing to serve as the alternate for an ETJ member on the board of adjustment. So we would still need to find 2 full-time board members for that board. And then in addition to those 2 boards, Wilkes County is going through this process also. And well, they had a member come up for reappointment in the end of June, and that member is, I believe, is Mr. Sink, Charles Sink. Wilkes County has a planning board that has representation from the towns and the county as well. And Mr. Sink is one of our North Wilkesboro representatives up for reappointment. So for tonight, we need to, what we're going to start doing, staff and the chairs of the planning board and the board of adjustment, is trying to do more outreach. If there's anyone that you guys know of that would be interested, coworkers, colleagues, acquaintances, we need to have good people come forward and sit on those boards. And then the other thing we need to do is, if you would like to either reappoint Mr. Sink, or if you want to have someone else appointed to the Wilkes County Planning Board.
Go ahead.
My recommendation is that we accept applications for all the open positions, even if we have folks who are willing to serve once again, just so we have more opportunities, but also to make sure we've got the people who we want on those boards. And we know it's hard to fill these seats, but you never know. You might get an application from someone who's really good that you want to serve and that you want assistance from. So I would recommend accepting applications for all of them, and you all choosing who you wish to appoint from that pool of applicants at a later date.
I don't have a problem with that, but I've talked with Charlie and Terry Stackhouse both, and they said they'd be willing to serve again.
It's excellent.
It is.
But now Terry is on the county. I mean,
Yeah.
Terry,
Yeah.
you looking for Terry to be on one of our boards in
No, no.
town or for the county?
County to be reappointed to what her position now.
Meredith, what measures are being taken to try to, I mean, for a long time, it's been kind of word of mouth, trying to promote or recruit. Is there a way we can take a little bit more aggressive approach to try to find some people who might be interested in serving on these boards? Because the ETJ, that's the surrounding area, and there might not be as much familiarity with people in those areas that we, so we might need a little bit more aggressive approach to find those people. So whether it be, you know, I'll leave that in your hands, but I think we're gonna need to take, instead of the old, you know, well, John Doe, I think he might be a good one, I think we're gonna need to, or just a simple ad in the paper or something, we're gonna need to take a much more, maybe a social media approach or
That's what I was thinking.
some type of approach to see if we can encourage people from these areas
Yes, sir.
to come in.
That's what I was thinking. I'm gonna brainstorm. I talked to Lisa Casey, who's our chair of the board adjustment, and she was gonna reach out to people. She was also gonna talk to the county board commissioners, see if they had someone in mind, send them an official letter. I'm just gonna, luckily next month I have 3 meetings with all the boards, so I'm gonna just keep reminding them like, hey, let's get the word out, do social media, maybe even do a newspaper ad, so. Yes, posting on the website and just talking isn't getting us very far right now, so we need to do some new measures.
I don't think people realize that it truly makes a difference in how important these boards are. People are on all kinds of boards at your different places. You know, the reality of how important these are to the town of Hillsborough is pretty serious.
Right, so we need to do like an educational at the same time too.
Absolutely.
Are there any punitive measures from the state if we don't fill these in a timely manner?
I'm not sure, the first things that come to mind is with the Board of Adjustment, we have to have a certain majority vote for variances. So that could get kind of iffy. Having alternates help because they can fill those positions, and that's what we've been doing since September with the 1 position we're down. But you know, we do have the potential to have a lot of cases where we don't have enough members show up to the meeting, so we have to postpone that. Or we have, essentially, we just keep having motions that die because we don't have the adequate folks sitting on the board. So, yeah, there could be some issues.
Commissioner, on the last topic, we talked about being business friendly, and one of the ways we can be business friendly is to make sure land use decisions go through our system quickly and aren't delayed due to lack of participation on these boards. And so, you know, the private sector folks say time is money, and the longer they wait, the more expensive it is, and the less likely they are to want to develop here. So being able to move these things quickly through is a very important reason to keep these boards filled.
Oh, I agree, I completely agree. I just didn't know if there was any action that the state, you know, because we've got to find the people that want to do this. And so I just didn't know if there was, you know, but
Like they have a
there's not right there
minimum,
on your team, but that's.
Yeah. They've got a minimum set of how many you have to have, but yeah, we want to have a full board ideally, so things go through smoothly.
You said there is a time limit on it
Or which part?
for the board to have it from the state.
No, sir. We have vacancies, but, you know, we want to try to fill it as quickly as possible for our own benefit.
I think the only time limit is the Wilkes County seat has to be ideally has to be reappointed by July or June 30th.
Okay.
So that was the only one that is very time sensitive.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Okay. Moving on, excuse me, moving on to item E, hiring bonus and part-time wage increase.
Yes, sir. Well, you all probably have observed that there's a lot of choice for people willing to work right now. Lots of folks are hiring. And so it's been very difficult for us to find folks to fill our part-time and seasonal positions. And I'd like to give the department heads some tools so that they can be more competitive out in the marketplace for part-time and seasonal employees. And the 2 tools I'd like to give them are flexibility on the hourly wage that they pay part-time employees and the ability to give a small hiring bonus to part-time and seasonal employees that agree to come and work for us. Neither of those concepts are present in our personnel policy as written. And so I'd like to ask you all to consider adding those to the personnel policy. And if you look at the attachment on your agenda, you'll see the proposed language that I'd like for you all to consider putting in the personnel policy. Right now, we're just talking about it. Of course, we've had experience with the personnel policy over the last year or so, and know that we have to give current employees a comment period on this. And so that'll last a couple weeks, and I'll bring this back for your approval, probably at the end of June. But I will also say that just because we are adding this doesn't mean it's gonna be used. I'm gonna leave it to the discretion of the department heads whether or not they want to use it. And of course, there's always issues you have to deal with, pay equity issues and making sure that there isn't, pay discrepancies in your division. But if they can work through all those issues and they feel comfortable offering a new employee slightly higher than what they would have been paid otherwise, I want to give them the ability to do so. And that's what I'm asking for your thoughts on here this evening. The hiring bonus, I don't think that'll be a tool that's used a lot, just because we're only letting them go up to $250, which isn't a ton of money. But it might be what they need to get over the top and hire an employee who's picking between a few different offers. We are going to put a requirement that the hiring bonus is only paid out after 80 hours of work, because we don't want to have someone show up and work one day and get paid their hiring bonus and then walk. So we'll set that at about 80 hours, so about 2 full-time weeks of work. For a part-time or seasonal employee, that's more like 3 or 4 weeks of work, but we'll have a sense by then of whether they're going to stay or not, and whether we have, pay it out. But those are the 2 proposals that I'm bringing to you here. And then the last thing I'll point out, just for the benefit of the millions of people who are listening online, is that we're setting the cap at $13 per hour for most part-time positions. So that includes pool lifeguards, green thumb crew, and other part-time workers, except law enforcement. The North Wilkesboro Police Department uses a lot of part-time help from retired law enforcement officers. And that is a very competitive marketplace right now. So we want to give Chief Thornburg the ability to offer those part-time law enforcement officers up to $15 per hour, which will make them more competitive with other departments.
You need any kind of action on that?
No, sir, not tonight.
Okay. Any questions or comments?
I think it's forward thinking, Wilson, to go ahead and get this in place. So you're ready. I noticed that just from the local news media that this is happening. So all the time, yeah.
So the one sort of, possibility that I'll point out to the board is that in the current year, department heads will have to work with their existing budgets. So they'll only be able to give this if they can manage the hours or manage the wages of their current part-time employees to fit within the dollars they've been allocated for part-time salaries. But in next year's budget, I imagine that they'll all be asking for a little bit more in the part-time salaries line item to be able to carry forth with the people that they've raised the salaries on, and to maybe offer this to other employees that they have. So that's a possibility to look out for during budget season next year.
I think it's a good idea, and I guess the one thing that brought to my attention was trying to get lifeguards at the swimming pool.
Yes, sir. Just as an FYI, one of the ways we've tried to induce more applicants for those positions is to cover the cost of their training class. It used to be that the applicant paid for that themselves, under the presumption that they could use it elsewhere too. But now, since we're having trouble fielding a full crew of lifeguards, we're going to cover that for the folks who have taken it this summer, and hope that induces them to come board for us. And of course, once this goes into effect, Nelson will have the ability to raise their wages as he sees fit.
Anything else? Anybody else got any more suggestions or comments on this item? Okay, we'll move on to item F.
All right, I've got Leanne on the line to help us with this item. And maybe Meredith, if possible, if you could bring up a map of this area, just so we'll have a visual representation. So while she's doing that, welcome, Leanne.
Hello, thank you for having me tonight. Will you want me to go ahead, or did you want to make any comments prior?
Go ahead.
All right, well, I appreciate you allowing me to speak, and it's bringing you the request from the EDC to consider helping us with the Wilkes Business Center that we're working on, the Commercial Business Center, where we were awarded $1.5 million from Golden Leaf, and the county on the 15th of June will be considering matching that with another $1.5 million, which gives us $3 million to build the Wilkes Commercial Center. Now, this is a building that's around 31,000 square feet that would accommodate both a 20,000 and a 10,000 square foot unit that would be high ceilings, dock doors, offices, all the amenities that we hear people are always asking for in a new building that we currently do not have available in our town or in any of the towns or the county area. And so with the plan for this construction, obviously we got our quotes back in October of last year. And as you know, construction costs have increased. We have actually received some quotes that were exceeding our budget, but we've shaved off the non-essential items that we could to get back down to the $3 million budget to be able to meet the requirements of what we told Golden Leaf that we would be able to do with this plan. You know, the whole plan is that if we can build this building, find tenants, which I feel like we will do before we even have the building completed, that we would duplicate this process through the income of lease payments. With no debt on the building, we can put all the funds towards building another building and continue to duplicate the process so that we are meeting the need of having available space for our businesses, whether that means our existing ones or the ones that might be coming into the area looking and trying to find a space to bring their business. So we want to be able to duplicate this process. And we found that that the water association's water supply does not provide adequate pressure for sprinkler systems for this building. And without the sprinkler systems, we will be limited as to what types of businesses can go in there for their insurance purposes or their storage purposes, depending on what type of materials that they might manufacture or assemble in that building. Having a sprinkler system will get their insurance rates down to a very reasonable rate versus much higher if you do not. You can do firewalls, you can put in a pump station, but either one of those are almost as expensive as just asking for the water line to be extended from the new tower down to the building. That is the greater good for the whole community, that you would be able to serve businesses. I think there's a church, there's businesses on the corner, and I know there's property that you considered annexation on last year that would like to be able to develop that land in time without having adequate water pressure in that area, they're going to be constrained with what they can do, as well as we would be at the Wilkes Commercial Business Center. So I'm asking if you would consider, I think Wilson has put together the cost, and we were asking if you would consider $150,000 in infrastructure that would serve the property that was annexed many years ago and has sat vacant. That would increase your tax revenue once we bring in that building, as well as support new businesses. And we, based on metrics, we feel like at least 20 jobs, possibly more. It just depends on what type of industry that will come in there. The county has been talking with us and with Wilson about possibly being able to help, but we wanted to come to you first, especially since this is North Wilkesboro property, and would entertain any questions that you have in regards to the request.
I don't have any question. I think we need to go for it.
I do, Mayor, I feel like this ultimately will be a big plus for the town. And as Leanne said, there are many potential groups who would be water line expanded. Can I make a motion?
Well, Commissioner, what I was going to recommend is that you let us come back with a little bit more information about how the mechanics of the deal will work.
Okay.
I still don't have clarity on whether we would do the extension ourselves and just donate the money, or excuse me, if we would do the extension ourselves and receive money from them, or if we just give money to them and they'd hire someone. I'm not quite sure how the mechanics of that work yet. And then also I'll come back with a proposal on which funding source to use, because there are a couple different possibilities. The two main ones I had in mind were savings from the Kerr Scott early payoff. We had budgeted money in the upcoming budget to make our yearly payment on the Kerr Scott debt, but we paid that off last year, and so now we've got that extra money to spend on something. We were going to apply it to the expenses related to the active flow project at the water treatment plant. We've got other money we can apply to that, but I just want to make sure that that is not going to affect that project in any way. We also have ARP dollars still available that we could use, but I want to make sure that this is an eligible project before we commit those. And then also the reason why the mechanics are important is because if we're building it and getting reimbursed from them, I literally need to make sure we have enough cash to be able to front the money and do the construction before we get the repayment from them. So just would like to get a little bit more information before your approval. I wanted to make sure you all were okay with going forward with this.
Absolutely. Okay.
I mean, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
If the amount of investment that's going into that building is $3 million, I mean, you think roughly within 10 years, just in the increase in tax revenue, it'd probably cover the cost if it was somewhere around 150,000. So I think it's a good thing, and we definitely should support it. I look forward to seeing that info, Wilson. Thank you. Thank you, Leanne.
Thank you for allowing me to be here tonight, Commissioners.
Thank you, Lee.
All right. Item G, board procedures, second discussion.
Okay, so tonight I'd like to follow up on a discussion that we had at the previous meeting, but left open because there were a few more questions to talk about. And then talk about two new items regarding board procedure. And then at the end, ask you all if there's the need to have a third discussion on another topic that I'll bring up. So If you'll flip to the briefing sheet, which is behind your agenda item, you'll see that I added a little bit more information on the public comment sessions. With the change to the meeting format that you all approved in principle last time, we'll have 2 public comment periods a month. And so I think it's worthwhile to establish some ground rules on how those operate, so that they don't take over our meetings and we spend hours and hours receiving public comment. I included an excerpt from School Government's blog about this very question, essentially establishing that we do have the legal authority to set reasonable limits on the public comment session of our meetings. I'll draw your attention to the bullet points at the bottom of the page there. We'll establish the time as 5 minutes per speaker. And I think it'd be a good practice to have Debbie time that, maybe with a stopwatch or something that's visible to the speakers so that they know about how much time they have left. To endow the mayor with discretion to give folks reasonable extra time to finish their talk, but not to continue on indefinitely, take up a new topic and so forth. We'll limit the general comment period to 10 speakers. There was a question on, since we're broadcasting our meetings now, how do we include folks online who might want to participate in the public comment period? And the recommendation that I'd make is that we reserve the last 5 spots for folks online. If there's no one online that wants to participate, we open it up back to the folks who are here in person to fill the remaining 5 spots. Speakers may not yield or grant their time to another speaker. I've seen folks try to do that as a way to give their most persuasive advocate an hour to speak. And I don't feel like that's in the spirit of what the public comment period is about. So we would prohibit people from doing that. And I'll skip over the policy choice that you see there and go to the last bullet. And this is a recommendation by the school government as well, that before each public comment period, the chairperson reads a paragraph that essentially shares the ground rules. And so I've included a draft text there. We can tweak that, of course, if you like. The policy choice that we didn't come to a conclusion on last time was whether the board is going to respond to speakers. That's up to you all, but I can tell you that the general practice across the state is to not respond during the public comment session, but to have some sort of follow-up mechanism in place that the board can use to respond to the people they want to respond to. And so I've included in this proposal that a bullet saying that commissioners will not respond during the public session, but if necessary, we'll follow up at another time.
And to add, not adding to it, but the comment, how country council and government board operate the way Wilson was laid out. And, it seems to be a policy that I've attended a few other town and city board meetings over during my tenure, and that's basically the way they operate. So I think it's good. That's my opinion.
I do want to talk about one other issue that I did not include in the recommendation. I'd like to explain why. The general statutes also give us the ability to govern the sort of what they call order and decorum of the comment session. And it essentially gives the chairperson the ability to have someone, to take away someone's time or even have them removed from the session if they, become unruly or get out of order. And I've seen that in action, but I did not include that in this proposal because I feel like that's a slippery slope from someone who's truly out of order to someone who's just talking about unpleasant things, which of course we're not permitted to regulate. If someone gets up there and is giving us the business and criticizing us, we just got to take it. And I feel like if we've got a possibility in our guidelines to take someone's time based on their decorum, that it's a hard thing not to profound criticism with being out of order. So I just sort of left that out. If things got truly unruly, we've got the sergeant at arms here, the mayor can bang the gavel, but I didn't include that in there because I want people to feel like they have the ability to speak freely and criticize us if that's what they want to do.
Kind of goes with the territory.
Sure does.
So tonight, Wilson, do you need us to do anything except say this sounds good or not?
Yeah, I just need you to say it sounds good, and at a later meeting, I'll bring back all the board procedures that we've talked about sort of in one document and ask you all to approve that at that time.
It sounds good to me. I feel like we're moving along in the right direction to have things clarified and rather than just making our own assumptions as to what's expected of us.
Well, we had all generally agreed on most of these things. The one thing was the policy choice thing. So from this chair, I'm going to express my approval of that particular policy choice statement that you made about refraining from responding during the public comment. So please note that from my chair, I think that wording is sufficient and should be used.
I agree.
I will voice my disapproval of that. I think it's good as a recommendation. It's probably wise not to say much, but I feel like as a board in a town, we already face criticism of, lacking transparency and being responsive to citizens. And I feel like that would enforce that. I was speaking to a lady with the School of Government today about the next thing on the agenda. And I mentioned that to her, and she said that was, recommended at a lot of places. And I said, well, what happens? How do you enforce that? And she basically said, my colleagues and I agree, there's really no way to enforce it. And it's more of a recommendation. So if it's a recommendation that people don't speak, that's okay. I'm not going to commit to that as an elected person. And I may be the only one on the board that feels that way, but I just feel like I don't know what somebody might say when they come in there. We're a small town. We're not a large municipality, but I just wanted to voice my thoughts on that particular item.
Anybody else?
So if the majority of the board is in favor of the policy choice if you've written it, you'll move along.
I don't think it's gonna be, nobody knows that, nobody knows that, but I think it's either, I can. What do you think? What do you think?
As far as making comments back to the public,
Yeah,
I would recommend to refrain.
I would, but
I think there are probably instances where there are going to be exceptions to that overall policy.
right.
I would tend to agree that it's probably a better policy to
I
refrain.
agree.
And as I mentioned before, when Ed was here, he occasionally would say to someone who, the example I gave of the skate park was in disrepair. He was just so open. Here's my business card. Please call me tomorrow. We will take care of this. And so it doesn't mean that we choose not to respond publicly. It doesn't mean we're ignoring any problem. It just means we're trying to keep the meeting moving calmly forward.
And
I
likewise,
agree,
there's,
we don't do this, but you can't say that you can do it. Everything, everything.
likewise, if there's a matter that the board wants to follow up on and wants more information on, you all, of course, can directly provide more information, perhaps follow up with the constituent at a later time. All right, can we shift? I'd like to shift over number 2 and go straight to number 3, just because I think that's a little bit easier. This just codifies for future boards and for future staff what the expectations are with regard to transparency. And I've listed some of those there, including publishing not just the list of agenda items, but all the background information like we do now. Feel that's a more transparent approach to governing, to make all those documents publicly available, to broadcast the meetings. You know, broadcasting meetings used to be a huge deal, but now it's as easy as popping our little owl up there. So I think that we should use those easily accessible electronic tools to broadcast our meetings. And to make sure that the broadcast of the meeting, the video, the audio recording if necessary, and an updated agenda, because sometimes the agenda we distribute before the meeting gets updated on the evening of the meeting, are all published publicly on our website in a timely way after the meeting's over, so that folks will have the ability to go back and reference those items. Any objections? All right, so going back to number 2, the reason I wanted to skip over that one is because this is one that makes me a little nervous. You know, the sort of idea behind the council manager form of government is that a professional manager is there to direct staff, so that staff don't have to be faced with the possibility of appearing to favor one elected official over another. And so most towns that I know of have guidelines in place for when and where the elected officials can get in contact with staff. So I've taken a stab with some standards for us here in this document that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. Essentially, you all are, according to these guidelines, able to contact town manager, the town clerk, department heads, or deputy department heads at any time. Unless it's a very, very routine item that you're calling about on behalf of the constituent. So for example, if you get a call from your neighbor that their garbage has been missed, I'm okay with you calling Steve Shoemake to come pick that up. But for anything more significant than that, I'd ask you to call the department heads or me. And then the other rule I'd like to, or the other guideline I'd like for us to consider is that that we're governed by what I call the 4-hour rule. And that is in essence that
I can't hear you.
4-hour rule.
Okay.
So any inquiry that's likely to take over 4 hours of staff time be made either to the department head or to me. And then we'll use our discretion to decide how to assign that matter. And I'll just tell you that the rule of thumb I'll use is that if you call me about an item that's going to take more than 4 hours, but it's something we've talked about as a board, and you know, it's clear on everyone's mind that this is not an item benefiting an individual, but something we've talked about as a group, then I'll assign that out and have staff work on it. If it's a new item, then I'm going to bring it to you. I'm going to ask you in this forum whether you feel it's okay to spend staff time on that item. So that's essentially the process that I am recommending here. Let me give you an example of an item that would not follow these policies. If someone called Meredith up and said, we want you to do a total rewrite of the zoning code to make it easier for development. Clearly that would take her more than 4 hours. And there are a lot of policy choices that the whole board would want to weigh in on before those changes were passed. And so I would ask that Meredith and I start working on that until we have it approved by the majority of the board. So that's an example of the kind of thing that I would ask you to filter through me and not call staff directly. But the thing to remember, 4-hour rule, anything more than 4 hours, please filter through me or department.
Wilson, I'm so glad you brought that up because I have had mixed emotions about whether to bring something along those lines up myself, as I see us again changing from how we've operated. I know when I first came on the board, our manager did not want elected people even to talk to department heads without his knowing that. And I very much understand that because whether we realize it or not, there's nothing special about us. We just got elected to this job. We don't exactly know what we're doing in many cases. We just do the best we can to guide the town and move forward. And it's easy to get off in the weeds with a department head about, old staff called Rob Thornburg and said, I am worried about the raccoons in my neighborhood. There are so many raccoons out there that I want us to get together and figure out how it is we're going to combat this matter. And so then I go sit in his office and we talk about other things too. And I develop what to me feels like a friendship in a sense. But nobody else on the board has access to what's going on. They don't know about the raccoons. He probably, or any department head, probably feels pretty obligated to spend time with us. And only he and I know about the raccoons. You don't know, nobody else on this board knows. It is a slippery slope to getting into inappropriate. Every single person sitting on this board has the right to know about the raccoons, not just me. And Rob is in a very awkward position because if he makes you mad, then I might go off and try to convince you all to fire Rob. And or which we can't do, but we could then pressure Wilson to do that. So I know it sounds silly what I'm saying, but the way that I think the School of Government tries to encourage us to work is to call Wilson and say, Wilson, we got a raccoon problem in my neighborhood. And will you help me figure out a plan? And then Wilson will say, yeah, but this is going to take more than 4 hours, so we need to let the whole board know. Because there have been things that have been researched in recent months that I knew nothing about it. And that's not fair to me or any other commissioner. It wouldn't be fair if I were the one spending time. He said, we're not going to do it.
No, he said, we got nothing. But I'll get some things he did. I don't care.
Well, so the way you described it, I will say,
I agree.
excuse me, Commissioner, is that I would always appreciate if you all kept me in the loop on your communications with department heads, but even if you don't, I'm probably going to find out anyway, just because, we work well together and, they're going to be made aware of this guideline and so forth. So, but there are some things that, they're specialists at, and that as soon as you call me, I'm going to turn around and call them about anyway. So I want to give you all a little bit of flexibility to be able to talk with them about matters. If the thing you're talking about the last 10 hours, they're going to come to me anyway and say, this is a huge commitment.
That's good. And communication, knowing that none of us deserves information that is not available to all of us is a really key factor. And easily forgotten, I think, when you get worried about raccoons.
There's Nikki goes for it. All right, so, no objection to that.
And just a quick note, because I know it's something that's been on Andrew's mind. That policy choice, Andrew, to expedite the pace of the meetings, commissioners will generally refrain. If it was a hot button issue, Andrew, and you needed to say something, I don't think we'll throw you out the door or put you under the bus
No.
if it was to come up. But I think it's just a policy choice to make it stated that it's generally considered for us not to comment during a public meeting. I'm just making that little clarification there because I could just as easily make a question or a comment too. So, but if our policy is to generally refrain from comment, I think that's a wise choice.
Well said, Michael.
All right, and then the last question I have for you all tonight is, I'd like to have a third discussion on board procedures on the following topics. And if you
Don't, I can't hear you. I can't hear
If you've been listening to me, you probably heard me allude to this earlier, and that is the process for making appointments to boards. We've got a lot of boards, we've got a lot of terms that are expiring. I'd like to hear your thoughts about whether you think it's worth it to try to recruit new folks to those boards each time. And then the second thing is, sorry, Andrew, but remote participation. So Andrew's remote participation is acceptable tonight because we don't need him to form a quorum. But if we were missing a couple folks and there was a question on whether we had a quorum or not, his being remote would put us in questionable legal territory. And so we need to have a policy on when people are permitted to participate remotely and so forth. And we'll need Danny to advise us on that because there's actually some, quite a few different statutes that govern that. So I want to bring that back to you all and hear your thoughts on that as well.
I guess because of Zoom, we just all assume that's or I assume it was always an acceptable option. So it's not necessarily.
It's not necessarily when there's voting to be done. Participating is okay, but voting is different. And also, we're under a different set of rules right now because of the pandemic. But once the state of emergency ends and we go back to the normal rules governing that, we might have to reassess our practices. So if there's no objections, I'll bring back a further conversation on board procedures on those two. That's all I got for that one here.
All right. Take it down to H. Town manager, evaluation process, and administration. All right.
I'm good. Okay, since the last time that we met, per your request, I emailed each of y'all our current performance appraisal because you wanted to kind of compare it to the one that Andrew had. So I'm gonna run it over to y'all to comment on.
You want me to take it in? All right, so, I have spoken individually with other commissioners about this. And, I think there seems to be general consensus of a method of creating this evaluation process. I do want to mention that, Wilson has created part of it, and then Commissioner Palmer has worked extensively to also do some research and prepare some supporting documents, and I thank him for all his hard work, because it just made me to talk again. All right, so the proposal that I kind of gave was kind of doing this in a three-pronged process or a three-part process. The first part is based on Wilson's previous work and performance plan, where he basically is given a forum where he comes before the board stating his different goals and performances that he feels that he has completed within the previous fiscal year, stating basically how he wishes, what was the strategy that created the project or goal, and then what was the brief description of it, the rationale, is it complete or is it ongoing, what are the project milestones, and like that, and any other information that Wilson would like to add. I'd like to see him present that to us in person, with us each to have a copy of those related goals and proposals or goals and projects. And then on that same form, I would also like for us to be able to have an area where we could make notes amongst ourselves privately while he is speaking, so that it can be referred to later as, for further discussion into what is actually going to be the third part of the process. The second part of the process is the town performance evaluation form that Commissioner Palmer worked for. As it was presented to us from Commissioner Palmer, it was a 10 item with subheadings or subcategories in it, which covered different aspects of those 10 items. Now, I had, this would be what's up for discussion. I had a couple of thoughts on this myself. Personally, I am not a big fan of the numerical scoring system. I believe that either an employee or a person is either doing the job correctly or they're not. So it would I'd like to see a pass needs work system, but that's up for discussion because that's why I'm throwing this out here. The second thing there were two items, and in this thing it would be item 7 and item 8, which is staffing and supervision. And this kind of alludes to what Wilson was just speaking about. In order to really assess the town manager's supervision skills and staffing skills, I think it would, because we're on the outside looking in, it would require us to interact with staff and department heads. And I'm not sure that that's really in our wheelhouse to do. But again, that's up for discussion. But me personally, striking the staffing and supervision portions of this form, I think is certainly worth discussing. The thing is once we have this is to be done by us within our allotted time period. And then the third part of this is to come together as a collective, because to me, the board is the employer, not the individual commissioner, but the board itself. So if we had our forms that we had created ourselves and our comments that we had created about the goals and project performance, we could then come up with an evaluation form which, as a consensus, would cover strengths, weaknesses, areas that, expectations, other goals that we would like to see, and then present that back to Wilson first in closed session, as we should, and then if we opt to open session, I think the history has said that the town manager's evaluation was not public record or not presented in open session, other than it was satisfactory or non-satisfactory. I think it was, instead of details, it was just basically given as an up or down in the open meeting, but that the nuts and bolts of the discussion, it would be in closed session with Wilson or the town manager. So that's my thoughts. Those are my thoughts. So I now throw it to the group to see if we can come up with something that we can get in place by July, when all this process starts.
My own thoughts, I like incorporating Wilson's plan into the total package that we create as the manager's evaluation, because that's what he's using for staff members, and so he's used to thinking that way. He's got the performance plan goals, and I think he wants to present that to us as well. So I think it's respectful, and it should be helpful to know what he thinks about what he's doing. And so to incorporate part of the ICMA evaluation form is also helpful, because there are areas of that are not going to be covered in the performance goals. And also like your idea of collectively coming together. That is a very awkward stage of an evaluation, and one that I don't think we've ever really gotten good at. You know, if you look at big companies like Lowe's, for example, they do intensive training. They teach their managers how to evaluate people. And we don't get any training. We just are on our own. Some people have been evaluated. I've been evaluated every year I worked. Sometimes I worked for more than one employer and would get multiple evaluations in a year. But someone who's self-employed may have never been evaluated. And so it's a whole new process. And we don't get training on it. So that's one thing I want to stress, is that this is always going to be new to some commissioners and a little bit awkward. And so when you come together and try to develop that collective statement, that can be difficult. There's probably no way to make it really painless, because sometimes it is. It's awkward. And but I think you hit the nail on the head, Michael, when you said this is a collective evaluation, because the board does not operate individually, we operate as a board. And I am with the looking at the past or needs work side of it versus the number side of it. I had been always supportive of the numbers until I really began to think about this before I met with you, and thought, what have I used the numbers for? And basically that is for determining whether the manager gets a raise. Because I think before that you had to get 2.5 or 3 to qualify for getting a raise out of the 1 to 5 numbers that could be chosen. And but I realized you either get a raise or you don't. We don't get if a person got 2.5, 2.5, we didn't give them half the raise everybody else got. We just gave them the raise. So it seemed to me that the numbers were not as helpful as I had initially thought they were. And you either get the raise or you don't. And there are ways to make your feelings known as you're filling out these other forms. So I'm not so caught up in doing, and I am not caught up any longer in doing a number system. I'm fine with pass or needs work.
Well, I want to point out one other thing. I also spoke with Wilson, and Angela and Debbie and Bert, you guys were the ones that hammered, and Mayor too, hammered out the employment contract with Wilson, and his current employment contract, both in employment and compensation and evaluation processes, makes no notation of numerical scoring. So it's his employment contract as it reads right now is not tied to, it's tied to a satisfactory evaluation. That's all it states in this employment contract. So it's like you said, a person who scores 2.8 versus or a person who scores 5, if it was a hard line thing where, raises are not usually on sliding scales, they're usually you get one or you don't. And I do want to also point out that, town manager COLA, is not, I don't think it's subject to evaluation process at all, that it is separate. So the COLA rate, which is the cost of living adjustment, is not effective even if you were to have an unsatisfactory review.
I didn't realize that.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
I keep asking that because I can't hear you well. I've got a few things I was going to mention. I wish I would have done this sooner, but I reached out. I wrote an email to the lady that teaches the class on the town manager evaluation and board evaluation for the UNC School of Government. She actually called me today. And so I got to ask her some questions and pick her brain on a few things that I think were important. And the thing that she stressed to me that I think we need to think about is the number one thing that this whole process is about is really about getting information to your town manager so they can absorb it and hopefully do a better job. One of the things she said, that she has found over time is that the written comments, a lot of managers find that really helpful. And one thing that I will say, I've got some other points, but something that I think is important is I feel strongly about the number system because, and she said that they recommend that too. She said, whether it's a 5-point scale or even a 3-point scale, that they recommend it. And I feel like without that, we're not giving Wilson the information he needs to know where he can improve. The metaphor that I use is it's like, if you graded school kids in F's and not F's, there's a lot of difference between an A and a D. And as a student, I always strive to try to make A's. And if I didn't, I wanted to at least know and be aware, but you could run into an issue if somebody thought that they were making A's, but they were making D's or vice versa. But it all comes back to me is what information are we getting Wilson to do his job better? And I feel like that the number system is, and also I will say I spoke to my dad who was a corporate guy at Lowe's and a couple other people in the corporate world, which is different, but they all agreed that you'll never get the best out of your employees without a rating system like that. And I agree because I guess I'll put it this way, whether I'm doing a band or a boxing gym or I'm being a commissioner, everything I do, I always try to do with a culture of excellence. And I don't feel like the pass-fail system is a system that sets Wilson up for excellence with his job. And I personally think he deserves better. And that's why I support it. The School of Government recommends it. You guys seem to really like what they recommend. So the lady's name is Peg Carlson. She's Public Leadership and Governance. Here's a few notes I got from speaking with her that I thought I would at least mention. She said managers need feedback. The graduated scale, which we're calling the point system, does a better job than the pass-fail system. Managers find written comments helpful. She talked about a 5-point scale versus a 3-point scale. She said it didn't really matter, just either one. The 3-point scale would be 1 means they do not meet expectations, 2 means they meet expectations, and 3 means they exceed expectations. She said that she likes the rating system with written comments because the written comments are helpful to the town manager. She said that the main focus, like I said earlier, should be is how the board could help the manager better perform his job, and that's what we need to focus on. She said a couple other things, and one ties into something that you guys brought up that I think is really good regarding the form that Wilson uses with department heads for their objectives. Is that would be a good way to do. She said that it's good to have the town manager be able to put in a personal assessment of their own. And that may be a way for him to do that. And he could add additional forms to it, kind of like last year, how he gave us a list of his accomplishments. That way he can let us know what he's doing, because he's probably done a lot of things we're not even aware of. And that she said that was important. She said, at the end of our meeting that we may want to put this on our protocol. We may want to ask the town manager, and I think we did this last year, how we can be better as a board and improve, because if you're in a closed session doing that review, it's probably one of the only times that you could you could do that and be more helpful. Maybe that's a question for Danny. And the other thing is, she said, I would encourage you at the end of your process, and I think it's really important since this is a new one, is to assess how the process went for us. And, should we make changes to improve it for next year? And one thing we might consider is she said that they have some documents. So just to be clear, the one document that I pulled that was the number system is from the International County Managers Association. And the School of Government actually refers to that. I read a document and sent it to a couple of commissioners today about that. I can't remember the name of it, but that's like the standard for the industry for people like Wilson that do that job. And that's where that form came from. But she said the School of Government has some forms that they've also kind of worked on and that may work better. And I said, we're probably too late in the process to check that out this year. But for next year, I think that would probably be smart for us to do. And one other thing I'll say is when I spoke to Wilson last week about something else, and I mentioned this to him because I know he's wanted to stay out of this conversation, but it was my understanding by speaking with him that he felt like the numbered system gave him better feedback as well. And that might be something y'all ask him on your own time or you bring him in. But I guess my whole thing is, in my only other thing besides what I've mentioned is just hope we don't make the process too complicated. That form that I made that had the schedule of events, I tried to be thorough with it, and maybe Trish can simplify it so it's not so hard, so that in the future boards will not see it as overburdening. And I guess the main thing is we just need to do what we can do to help Wilson get the information he needs to do his job better and document our processes. I think Michael brings up a good point that we govern as a board and not individually as commissioners. And I think that's really strong. And I think that that group discussion forum could help with that and feedback. But I also think that feedback from individuals, because not everybody agrees on certain things, may paint a bigger picture for Wilson. And because he's going to take all the information in and use it to improve his job performance. And if I were in his shoes, I would want to know as much information as I could and divulge it the best I could, what was there to go through it. And so that, I don't know, that's kind of my thoughts, but I do feel strongly about the numbered thing. But thanks for your time.
Andrew, one comment you might want to address. One problem I have with the number system that is newer is we've had one commissioner say they would never give a 5 because that's perfect, and nobody's perfect. So already you've got a skew there because you've got 5 people who might say 5 is perfect. You've got one who says, I'm never going to give a 5. So how do you work with these prejudices? We don't have any training. If we were working for Lowe's, we'd be trained, and there would be clear teaching to each person so that hopefully we'd all be scoring using the same methods in our mind.
Well, I think it's important that whatever system you go with, whether it's pass fail or a numbered system, you have to set the parameters at the beginning and do your best. Even in a place like Lowe's where people are trained, I'm sure that different managers and department heads probably interpret some of that stuff to their own way of doing things. But I will say that the lady Peg, she brought this up today, and she said that was why some people went to a 3-point system, was because they couldn't, she said they were getting these drawn out conversations on what a 5 is. And she said, if you go with the 3-point system, it's basically didn't meet expectations, met expectations, went above them. And either of those is very similar to the 5-point thing. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that would all come out in the wash, because if you have one commissioner that's like, I'll never give a 5, you might have another commissioner that gives lots of 5s. And I think somebody like Wilson's probably smart enough to realize that there's going to be a whole gamut of info coming at him. But the real thing isn't about whether he gets the pass or fail for the raise, because that's going to play out regardless of what we do. I mean, unless somebody's doing something crazy, they're probably going to pass that barrier. The real thing is, where does Wilson get the information from whatever documents we give him to say, I think I could do better here. and, you know, 3 commissioners mentioned that, or 4 did, or maybe 5 did, versus otherwise he may not know where he needs to be looking to strengthen his weak spots. And I feel like that's why it helps. And only Wilson could really answer that, but this is about him now, but in the future, it'd be about other managers.
Well, I want to say, having worked with Peg at the School of Government on my leadership training, I feel very comfortable with his recommendation, and I'm going to back Andrew with the point system, whether it's a 3 or a 5. To me, the School of Government, they've done the work for us, and I want to support that and go forward with that if other commissioners are in agreement.
I think we did.
Numbers.
No, it was, we could, start.
5s or 3s?
No,
3.
Three.
I agree, 3
I
would be
like
better
three.
than 5.
I like 3 too. I think it's just to the point.
I'm okay with that.
I like the number system myself. I mean, if whatever you guys, the majority does, that's what we're gonna do. Approve.
On a slightly different note, I don't know what you did, Commissioner Day, but Peg actually asked, "Are you with Angela Day in North Wilkesboro?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she said that you were in her group for something you did, so she remembered you.
Yes, thank you.
And the reason I say that is from what Andrew was saying with his discussion with Wilson and Michael, with all of you, and myself, what we write down under those 1 through 5, or whatever they are, the bullet points that we write down, or that we check, whether it's a 3, whether it's a 5, or whether it's a 2, or whatever, but the notation of what we feel like we write in there,
The comments.
the comment section, I think helps Wilson. I think we need to continue to do that.
I think really the numbers are not particularly helpful because we haven't been trained. Peg's thinking about her classes and I agree, she's a great resource, but we haven't, I don't think anybody from this group has ever gone to one of those evaluation classes and I don't have any problem if you want to write 1, 2, or 3. I think the comments are the critical factor with making sure that Wilson understands what it is that's important and.
So what my main goal for tonight more so was the actual process. The consensus is a 3-point, I'm a team player, case closed. All right, so we'll do 3, y'all want to do 5,
I think
whatever.
3 is simplistic, yet gives us plenty of information.
My thing is just trying to get so that we have the, I guess what I would say is first of all, let's do it from this standpoint, and we can kind of, we talked about this 3-step process. So the first step is to give Wilson his forum where he presents to us his narrative and his initiative progress and his goals and accomplishments. So, and that is written in addition to oral from him. He will fill out those initiative forms, and we'd have a copy of those to actually in front of us while he is presenting his talking points. So what is everybody's thought on that part of the procedure?
Thumbs up, yes.
Andrew, what's your thought on that?
Good.
About him getting it to us, like when to get it to us?
No, just the process of Wilson having his forum to present us with how he thinks he has done.
I think that has to happen. I think that totally has to happen.
So that's basically step 1. All right, so then that, in that form, as far as what he presents to us, does not necessarily have to have, you know, it'll be a blank piece of paper underneath it. If somebody has a comment they want to write into it themselves, then so be it. The second thing is the performance evaluation, which you guys have all agreed, and I will agree also. We changed, instead of a pass-fail, we do basically a one being unsatisfactory, two being satisfactory, or and then three exceeds expectations. Is that correct, Andrew? You've got the wording on that, so.
She said one was, does not meet expectations. Two is meets expectations, and three exceeds expectations. And you know, I talked to her about that for a second, and she said, you know, some boards go with that because they actually feel like it's a stronger rating system than the 5-step system. And I think there might be a good argument, because with that, it's like, it's simpler. With the 5s, it's like Debbie was saying, some people are like, well, I'm never getting anybody a 5. Like, they're gonna have to walk on water, and that gets confusing. But with the 3, it's like they didn't do the job, they did it okay, or they went beyond. And I think that's probably good.
All right, so changing.
On that performance evaluation, and I don't have my copy of that with me, but there were some numbers there that weren't very pertinent to.
Right, and I was going to get back to those. All right, so in that evaluation, do we want to basically, so currently what we have is under the category scoring, you have individual characteristics, which have 5 different points of order under that. And then 2 is professional skills and status, which also has 5 relations with elected members of the body is 3. Number 4 is policy execution. Number 5 is reporting. Number 6 is citizen relations. And all of these have 5 things. And what I would like to see, based on what I'm hearing from others, is that under each one of these categories, that there be a comment section where people can make their personal comments. Andrew, is that kind of what you had in mind?
Well, I didn't really think about that. She brought it up. I was going to just mention to y'all so y'all could think about it, but she seemed to think that was important, having the area for people to make comments along with it. I guess so. Instead of saying, okay, you get a 3 here, you know, you may say you get a 3 here because you did this and that, you did a great job at that or something. That is that was the way I interpreted what she said, but she just said it was important. And that's kind of all.
We could add a comment section under each one of those different categories, where if a commissioner chose to make a comment based on each of these different sets of information. The 2 things, Debbie, that I felt, and this is me and $5, you get a cup of coffee at Italian's. My thing was the staffing and supervision. I really felt like unless we were getting into talking to staff and department heads, that I don't feel like I would have the tools to evaluate Wilson on his ability, how he runs his staff and how he supervises his staff. Y'all can jump in there if you want. And then the last area was, the last 2 areas were physical management and, where's the, community. So I'm thinking change that form to 8 points with comment sections under each one that we fill out in a time schedule that, Christy, you know what the normal time schedule was for when we were filling out those forms before?
Well, July 1, of course, is the evaluation date, but normally I would get
the town manager's, sometime end of July.
All right. So what does, so that would be the second part of the process. What, based on those, we're changing to the point system, we're adding a comment section. What's people think about the staffing and supervision points, keeping or not keeping those as the second part of this evaluation process?
I really agree with you that it is inappropriate for us to be going, I'm just looking at Rob, that's why I keep saying that, to Rob Thornburg and saying, well, how do you think Wilson's doing? It's just, it would undermine any manager for us to, in fact, I think we should always make an effort to support our manager. And if we can't, then we need to do something ourselves. We shouldn't be seeking opinions from staff. And so that's why I think omitting that, is how else are we going to get that information? We don't know it.
You have an opinion?
I did, but I can't do it. Not today.
I'm split on it, so I'll kind of take a neutral position. I agree that I think that it's out of our purview to know those things, but some of these things, recruits and retains competent personnel for staff positions, that'd be hard to know in some circumstances and not. I think it probably, I've got mixed feelings on it, but I think I lean more to agree with Debbie and Michael on this than I do the other way, so.
Okay, so we kind of move forward with that.
1 through 3, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
I'm in favor of
And
that.
creating a form with a comment section that we get. So do we still prepare since we now have a personal comment section in each one of these areas, do we still need to do a collective evaluation from a closed session meeting?
Oh, I think we do.
Yeah.
Because for us,
Sorry.
what's going to happen, each of us is going to want to go to Wilson. If we don't collectively give him a result, everybody's going to want to go see him. And that's going to drive him nuts, or any manager, because you can't take 6 people coming in saying, well, this is what I think. If we've got to somehow form.
To me, you gotta lay it on his desk and walk away, and we can let him take it in, discuss, think about it, and I don't think we ought to be doing that.
Well, he'll have he'll have copies of the individual performance, this,
Well, maybe it is
performance
okay.
evaluation, he'd have those individual copies, because what's the point of writing comments if he doesn't get the comments?
Right, he does need those. So maybe it's okay just to hand them to him and,
That's what we did the last evaluation when we did numbers.
But I mean, so then as far as the closed session goes, all we basically do is say, I guess we could discuss any financial compensation or lack thereof, or, so, do we, like I said, that was what I was trying to do. Do we strike the collective?
although something isn't, say I said Wilson can never get the raccoon count right. And, but I was the only person that said that. Then it's immaterial, really, because what one person thinks, I could just be wrong. But if 3 of 6 of us say Wilson can never get the raccoon count right, then we need to talk with Wilson about this. So somehow a collective conversation seems valuable. If we don't know what the others are thinking,
What if we meet in closed session without Wilson, which is what we're planning on doing, correct? And we just talk with each other. I mean, it doesn't have to be a huge deal, but, you know, I feel like Michael might say, you know, this is what I feel like is his best, you know, his best thing he's accomplished in team. And I think for us to see how other of us feel back and forth really is helpful.
Because we
It
can't
puts all
talk
of our
to each
minds
other.
together
We can't do it without sitting together in a room.
in
and-
closed session.
That's correct.
So it's the only time we have to talk, and if we're talking otherwise, we're in trouble. We're doing the wrong.
I think that it would, you know, it could be challenging to do the group discussion part because getting people to agree. But if you could find like some common ground of high points, and if there were any need improvement or low points or whatever you want to call them, that there was common ground on, maybe it would be good to just, you know, bring that to him as a board, as a group, you know. I mean, surely I think it'd be easy to find some common ground.
I think so too.
Well, do we just kind of wing it, or do we try to have some type of structure where we're looking for
Oh, I
3 key pluses or 3 minuses, and then priorities, expectations, goals, objectives? I mean, do we give ourselves some type of structure in that closed session to try to reach a consensus, or that's all I'm trying to do is just
Or can we just?
formulate some type of plan where we're not floundering around, but we're just getting done what we need to do in a timely manner.
I think you're right, Michael, that we try to create some structure.
Okay. And then I like Andrew's suggestion from that lady that, you know, pass Wilson the ball in closed session and say, you know, give him the opportunity amongst the group to let us know. I mean, you know, he may not have anything to say, but I think that in that same closed session, you know, allowing him to not necessarily evaluate the commissioners, because he can't, but to give us some thought as to, you know, I think that's an excellent idea from Andrew, or from the school government.
Yeah, I can't claim that, but yeah, I think it's a great idea because I would like to know how personally I could help be better to help him. And I think that they call it the manager council form of government. And I think it's that relationship. And I think that's a way to give him an outlet there. I think we have to do that. And before I forget, one other thing that I read was, and I think we would do this anyway, but I don't know if this needs to be in writing, is to make sure that he gets these forms within 30 days of when you did the evaluation. So if you did it, that obviously we would give them to him that day, but I don't know if you need to put that in writing that he needs to get them that day or within 30 days. But I thought I'd mention that before I forget.
Do you have enough information based on what you've heard tonight to kind of put together structured forms for us to have?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I've talked enough there.
Any other comments? I guess we'll bring him back in then, okay?
Yes, I think so.
Yep, we got to close this meeting out.
He's here. I mean,
Michael, thanks for all your work on that. And I apologize to everybody for not being there and being kind of out of it. I can't hear what's going on really well. I'm sorry.
Mayor, one thing I wanted to bring up.
Yes, ma'am.
While we're waiting for a minute, because we often have comments at this time of day. And we have gotten a number of emails. We could potentially get written letters from people. And, you know, some people have the perception that it's difficult to reach us and to get input and get action. But every item that someone writes to us is public record. Every single email we get, every letter we get is public record. And one thing that I have thought might be helpful so that people know that they're heard, since they are already on public record, is to, and I'm just asking for us to think about this. I'm not asking for any action, just to consider this, but to make those communications part of our minutes in each meeting. Because I think people need to know they're heard, they're validated, and it's good for anyone who might be doing research or looking at what's going on in town to see what the pulse of the people is. And so I wish you would put some thought into how you feel about those communications are public record. I spoke to Danny about it today just to be certain about that. And he pointed out to me that not only are these emails and letters that we might receive public record, but what goes on the town's Facebook page is also public record. And so that to me was very interesting. So think about that. If you would, we could even read letters that we receive from the public, so that it goes
Read
out.
it during our board meeting, or when would we read it?
I was thinking during the board meeting.
Read it out?
Yes. So, so just food for thought. I just wanted to bring that up, and
Historical.
so thank you.
Yeah, well, they got stingers, you can pull them out.
Well, you know, we, yesterday, I said, and she, you get to,
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. I think
she's
they all.
done it.
Yeah.
She gets done it.
Well, and reading people's communication might be fair.
Well, the concern of that is it I want to say breaks my heart, but that's not exactly how I feel about it, is when one person communicates like that, and say we're working with a street of people on a certain street, or say in Finley Park, people, there's an issue at Finley Park, it brings so many people in, and that's not a good working situation between the town and the community. It's hearsay, it's discussed, it's just like stirring a hornet's nest in a lot of ways.
But, it's just food for thought, that anything that, what people are sending, I don't believe they realize is public record. So just to consider that. I'm not asking anybody to do anything, just think about this.
Well, all, like I said, all communiques like that, anybody can walk into the clerk's office and request any and all copies that have been sent, especially when it includes all 5 commissioners and the mayor. So it's not like we're violating any public trust, or I know some people would stand in our environment and make the same statements in open session too, as they would in an email. So I think that that's something that garners serious consideration. And on that note, Wilson, I still want to emphasize based on something that Danny said last time and all that, of creating a North Wilkesboro server email address that removes these email chains from our personal email boxes. And I really, really would like to see, Commissioner Parsons or Michael Parsons at North Wilkesboro _ or North _ Wilkesboro, whatever y'all use. I still think it's an easy add. And it also cleans up that access for transparency to have that all in one location. Because the situation that we have been discussed with before, trying to filter out what gets I mean, I try very diligently, all communication comes based on commissioner, goes into my archives under a folder that says commissioner info. But if I had a direct server with the town and any further commissioners that were to come in and whatever, I just think it would be easier and it's really not hard. It shouldn't be hard to set up.
So Commissioner, you probably saw me look at the screen. I was looking to see if Connie was still on. And if she were, she was gonna shake her fist at me because we have those created and I was gonna bring them tonight and just for time. So I don't want to email them to you for security reasons, but for example, if you want to come by tomorrow morning and get your password and so forth, we've got it ready.
Perfect. And then I think it needs to be updated, I think as each commissioner picks theirs up, it needs to be updated on the website under the commissioner contact information.
Yes, sir.
Now, I really am done.
Thank
Are,
you.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Yeah.
oh, wait a second. Are we gonna discuss that more and come to a conclusion on what Debbie was talking about, or?
I think it's food for thought, Andrew.
Not tonight.
Not tonight.
I'll be thinking about it. I've got mixed feelings because I wonder a little bit, like, how far does that go? I mean, does every email that we go with somebody end up in the minutes? And if so, how thick are these minutes gonna be?
If it's addressed to all 5 commissioners, Andrew, it's already public record.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is it not?
If it's between you and a constituent, I don't know that that's public record, correct? If it's just private.
It is.
It is private.
It is, yeah.
Relevant public matter.
Okay.
Yeah, I figured it was. I don't know. I don't want to do anything that make people not want to reach out, but I do know that sometimes we could all agree you get some emails that can be a little uncouth, maybe the word I'd use. And I guess that's just part of it, but I'll be thinking about that. Thanks, Debbie.
A lot of different practices on this. The one thing I would encourage that would do, I think that's an easy decision, is to just put a disclaimer on the bottom of our emails that says all emails or communications with elected officials is public record. And then beyond that, we can have some discussion. Commissioner Parsons, were you going to bring up the location of the meetings?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm not done, Robert, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Give me a moment.
You go right ahead. I'm gonna let you take the glory.
There's been discussion that either by the end of June, which would be the June 24th meeting, or one of the meetings in July, that we go home, back to our digs up in town hall at the boardroom. I think that we can do it safely. I think that, if I'm not mistaken, limiting, since we have the online availability, that limiting seating in our environment is allowed. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and so we can still be respectful, but I really, really want to go home.
Debbie or Meredith, have we advertised for anything on the 24th to be held here?
No.
Okay. The 8th we have, so we'll need to be here at least one more time. The one thing I've requested of the board is that we ask people who are unvaccinated to still wear masks.
You're what now?
I ask people who are unvaccinated to wear masks, and really ask everyone to still wear masks, but particularly unvaccinated people, because we have some employees who aren't allowed to be vaccinated for health reasons, and we want to make sure that they're protected.
The other thing I would mention is, Meredith, if I'm not mistaken, the internet in the boardroom is still much lacking. So before we go back, we've got to have that resolved, because we can't, we're gonna be home, but with still online, we've got to make sure that that's no glitches.
I have a backup plan for what I've done with my boards. I have either borrowed the water department's, i5, a little mini Wi-Fi device. And then I do believe, I've got my smartphone now to do that also, but it's not good quality compared to having a dedicated Wi-Fi in that room. So yes, we'll need to do something.
Well, I'm going to go back on the 24th if that can work for us.
Is that in June or July?
Yes.
June.
Did you hear Andrew? June?
June. Yeah, I mean, I'm okay with whatever y'all decide. I would feel most comfortable, if we waited, 6 or 8 weeks, just because from what I hear on the television, it sounds like in 6 or 8 weeks, they're expecting things to be in a much better place than even they are now. And it's much better than it was. And I think it's going to be, like Wilson mentioned, the mask thing. I think it'll be hard to know who's unvaccinated or vaccinated or any of that stuff. So.
Okay. I need a motion. Anything else? If not, I need a motion to adjourn.
Bert made it.
I did.
That's right. There's been too much discussed.
Right.
I've got a motion to adjourn. Everybody wants to leave.